Potentia Wealth brings you the Power of Wealthness podcast.
Around 1 million U.S. adults are forecast to be diagnosed with dementia annually by the year 2060. And the lifetime risk of dementia for those over age 55 is over 42%. That means nearly half of today's listeners will be impacted by a dementia diagnosis in their lifetime. And with numbers that high, the chances of somebody that we love being impacted by this disease is even higher. My name is Todd Barney. Welcome to the Power of Wealthness podcast. Today, my partner, Kevin Swanson, and I have the opportunity to talk to Laura Wayman, the Dementia Whisperer. Laura spent the last 2 decades not only helping families navigate the emotional aspects of a diagnosis, but also the logistical challenges of care. Laura, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Todd. I am so honored to be here with you all.
We are looking forward to this conversation. So I have to start with, how did you get the name the Dementia Whisperer?
That's interesting because my program is to change the perception of how we view and how we communicate and care approach to anyone who has any dementia symptoms. And so I can't, unfortunately, stop, fix, or change anything that's going on with an individual who has a cause of dementia symptoms. But what I can do is help the caregiver manage it. Now, one night, my husband and I were sitting watching the television, and we happened to be watching Cesar Millan, the dog whisperer. And at the beginning, and please don't misunderstand, I am not going to relate this to a dog, but what Cesar Millan says as the dog whisperer at the very beginning of his show is that he can't train the dog, but he can train the owner on how to better manage and take care of that dog. And my husband looked at me and said, "That's what you do. You help the caregivers, either professional or family. You help them to better manage what's going on with this brain function loss and dementia symptoms. You're the dementia whisperer." And it stuck. And so that's exactly my intent. My mission in life is to help people become what I call dementia aware, understand what dementia really is and how we can better engage and connect and care for that person who has any cause of dementia symptoms at any level. Either minor or extreme, at any level, we can better help them if we understand what it is that we are dealing with.
And I'd have to say, Laura, that it does impact the person with dementia, because when you do the proper, you set your expectations, you have planning and things in place, it not only is helping the caregiver, but it's providing more control to the person with dementia. But before we get too far into that, there are, based on the statistics and the number of people suffering from dementia out there at some form, there are a lot of changes that happen for those that don't live with someone with dementia within the family, the dynamics, the financial piece. Can you go into some of the big picture implications and roles shifts that happen for the family?
It is completely life-changing because when someone gets a cause of dementia symptoms, and let me quickly tell you that dementia is not an illness, a disease, a brain trauma, or a stroke. Dementia is a list of symptoms, and there must be a cause for symptoms. So if that person is showing dementia symptoms, there has to be something going on in their brain, such as an illness, disease, brain trauma. And what your body is doing when that happens, let's just take the leading cause of dementia symptoms, for example, Alzheimer's disease. If you get Alzheimer's disease, over time, what happens is you lose brain function and you lose the ability to process the world around you. And so what happens with the caregivers is they begin to see these changes happening, changes in behavior, changes in ability, changes in really the ability to think and process and understand the world around this person. They can happen slowly. So that's the effect that can be so global to that caregiver because it happens slowly over time. And so often the dementia symptoms are missed until they're extreme because they're manageable at first. You can help that person with this loss, but then it gets to be, like I said, global. And most people believe that the only dementia symptom they need to worry about is memory loss. And that honestly is the least of our worries because it's not really memory loss. It's loss of the ability to process the information that surrounds our memories. But it's so much more than that. It can be loss of balance, loss of coordination, very physical symptoms, such as if the cause is Parkinson's disease and it's affecting that portion of the brain, falling and loss of balance and coordination can be very early dementia symptoms that often families miss because they don't recognize that as a dementia symptom. So the effect on the caregivers is so life-changing because they can no longer communicate with that person in the same way because that person's brain can't accept communication as it did when it was healthy. So that's the effects that it can have. This person who is showing dementia symptoms over time, it can get so extreme that their personality changes. They have mood swings and they begin to not understand that this person is trying to care for them. So they will resist the care. So all of this is so emotionally painful and extreme that 68% of the time, if that caregiver does not ask for help, especially a same-age spouse, over 68% of the time, the caregiver actually gets sick and passes away before the person with dementia symptoms.
Wow.
So that's how life-changing this can be. It's extreme.
So Laura, with that, when should a person engage or start to get involved? If I'm a caregiver or a spouse and I start to worry, when do I differentiate between, they're just getting slightly more forgetful or just standard aging versus this is something I really need to be concerned about?
Well, no actual dementia symptom is ever normal aging. So the first thing, what I always tell caregivers is if you start to see changes in behavior, changes in the ability to do a simple task that was easy for that person in the past, changes in ability to process what they're hearing. So they're saying what, but it's not that they don't hear it. It's that they don't understand it. What I ask those caregivers to do is start to journal that, because if it's getting progressively worse, it definitely is dementia symptoms. Okay. So, and the journaling is going to help the medical community kind of hone in on what the cause most likely is. And there's over 100 causes. So we need to be aware of, and start to be, almost a detective to look for these kinds of things. And occasional memory loss is very common for any of us at any age. What I'm worried about is not just that they forgot where their keys are. Okay. It's if they suddenly find their keys in the freezer and they don't even know what the keys are for. It's this loss of ability to understand what the keys mean rather than just an occasional memory loss that you forgot where you put them, right? So it's so much deeper than just occasional forgetfulness. We all have occasional forgetfulness, but it is much deeper than that because they not only forget, they can't process the information any longer. Make sense?
For the patients who are experiencing dementia symptoms, do you find that they often are themselves in denial, even when it's brought to their attention?
That's so interesting because there's actually a dementia symptom big long word called anosognosia. Anosognosia means that the portion of that person's brain that would understand that it is impaired is also no longer working. And so if you think about, we actually in our society, because of our society's drug of choice, alcohol, people who drink too much alcohol experience anosognosia because that part of their brain is temporarily dulled by alcohol. So, they drink too much and then try and drive and they get pulled over and the highway patrol says, hey, I think you've had too much to drink. You're weaving or doing something that is against normal traffic rules. And so that highway patrol say you've had too much to drink. But that person, even though they have had too much to drink, will say, oh no, officer, I only had one beer. And then the officer will say, well, I need you to step out of the car and walk a straight line. And they will do it because their brain believes that it's functioning normally. Even though they can't walk a straight line, their brain believes it's still working. That's what happens when someone gets into an advanced stage of a cause of loss of brain function, is that portion of their brain is shut down. And so for example, the doctor will say, well, you have Alzheimer's disease. And that person will go home and tell their caregiver, that doctor doesn't know what they're talking about. I'm perfectly normal. I can take care of the bills. I can drive the car. But it's obvious to that caregiver that that is not true. But that person's brain continues to believe, because that impairment notification portion of their brain is shut off. Except with dementia, it's shut off permanently. And so the worse they get, the less they know of how bad they are. So it's so challenging because they will resist care and be very angry with their caregivers because they will say, I don't need any help. But they do. They can't do it on their own. The caregiver will say, Mom, you need to shower. You haven't showered for weeks. And that person with the dementia symptoms will say, oh, no, I showered this morning, because their brain believes it's still functioning normally. Isn't that interesting?
It is interesting. So as a caregiver who's experiencing this, what do they do? How do they manage this?
Well, you have to learn to be dementia aware. Yeah. So understanding it, first of all, understanding that you can't stop it, fix it, or change it. And also understanding that person can no longer process facts, figures, logic. So we have to, what I basically like to say is that person has a broken thinker. So we don't want them to think anymore, because when we allow them to think, it makes them anxious and resistant to our care. So the more we learn to think for them, and one of the most difficult things to learn, but the most powerful, is that we can no longer ask that person questions. Now, when you're communicating with someone with a healthy brain, it is very normal to ask questions. For example, Kevin, if I ask you a question, what does your brain have to do before it answers?
You have to understand what you're asking.
You have to think. You have to understand the question and then think of a reply that's going to relate to the understanding of the question. Correct?
Correct.
And we learn to do that in our lifetime. And that's how we communicate positively with someone with a healthy brain. It actually stimulates your brain to think. And that's good for a healthy brain. What happens when we start to lose that brain function of processing, which is what happens when someone has dementia symptoms, when we ask them to think, their brain locks up because they don't understand how to answer, and it makes them anxious, and they will resist you. So one of the biggest dementia-aware mantras that I teach is that no questions or options. Instead, our goal is to always give the answer that makes that person feel successful. So instead of asking you, Kevin, if I'm making you dinner, instead of asking you, would you like chicken or fish? What I need to do is say, look, I made your favorite fried chicken. Let's have dinner together. because that's going to make you feel successful and not have to think of the answer, which is going to make you anxious.
Yeah.
So that's number one mantra. No questions or options. Instead, we give them the answer. I call it positive action statements so that they always feel successful in our actions and their actions. And it brings that relief with the caregivers. But this is not easy because we have learned, because it's successful, all through our life to ask questions. So it takes a little practice, and it takes the understanding of why we have to change.
Now, Laura, from the caregiver standpoint, that makes total sense. What about from the patient standpoint? And what I'm thinking about is, a lot of times, if traditionally it's been either the husband has been the one leading in the money management and on finances and whatnot. And as they start to lose control, what's the best way for a spouse or somebody that has a loved one going through this to be able to help start to assume some of that control without having as much pushback from the patient themselves?
Once again, it's positive action statements. So when you start to see them struggle, we don't want to say, well, you're not doing a good job. I need to take over, because that's not going to make them feel good. And they're going to resist that because they don't believe they need it anyway. The best way is to do a positive action statement like this. You are so good with the finances, and I need to learn from you. So can we sit down and do this together? Because I really want to be as good at this as you are. How would that make you feel?
A lot better.
Yes. And earlier is better. Don't wait until the more they lose, the less cooperative they're going to be with you, because the stronger their brain wants to protect them from knowing there's something wrong. So that's another reason why, if we start to see this happening, we need to become their team member in this. And really what we're doing is we're becoming their Sherpa in this whole loss. So we begin to learn how to guide them to places where they're more cooperative.
That works well when you're looking to pay bills or to answer letters or to follow up with things like that. But when it comes time to take away what I would consider to be one of the most powerful things that make me an individual, which is driving, how do you take away the keys?
Well, you start early, and same thing. This has been successful for me. If there is a adult caregiver that can help, if they say, I need to practice driving. I'm just really anxious. And I would appreciate it. I would like to drive today and have you help me, because I want to be as good a driver as you. Now, all of this has to be customized, because everybody's dementia symptoms are very individualized. And so we have to be fluid and flexible. That has worked for some people, but sometimes it's so extreme loss and they have such extreme resistance to any kind of help that we have to do what I call creative interventions. So I've actually asked family members, like the wife was just, every time the wife would come home from the grocery store, there was a new dent in the bumper. And when asked about it, the wife would say, I don't know, maybe somebody backed up. But actually, there was interaction with people because she backed into something, and her brain was not allowing her to store that information. She was not processing. So once it was done, she came home, that was nowhere in her brain. She was actually causing these accidents. She was not safe, but she was not going to let the husband take over the driving. She just felt that was hers. There was no positive action statements. So I actually have had families in this situation take the ignition key and file it with a metal file so it doesn't work. Now, you have to have another ignition key hidden somewhere that person doesn't know about. Then when she went to try to start the car, it wouldn't work. And this is the creative intervention. Oh my gosh, I think we need to get the car to, something's wrong with the ignition. We need to get the car to a garage, because once that car is out of their sight and you take over the driving somehow, then it's going to be less of a trigger for them to think they can drive. So the car disappears, and then that person has some kind of form of transportation, and they take it over until the car is fixed. So we buy time that way. So I call those creative interventions, and they do take a little bit of iron will and loving. And it's not condescending. It's making sure we're keeping them safe with dignity, because their brains simply can't accept the truth about what's happening. So we have to surround them with feelings of love and safety and security and value and comfort by using this different care approach, because it's the feelings that are most important in all of this, because the feelings are what's left. So we learn to talk to the feelings with these creative interventions. Oh, you are a great driver, but there's something wrong with the car. Doggone it. And that as soon as you take that away, I've actually seen that person be almost relieved, because there's a part of them that's starting to feel a little insecure about driving. And so when it's not suppressing that natural ego, take away my independence. And it's another reason it tends to be more successful.
So we're saying use positive statements. We're talking about creative solutions. What else would you recommend as say, if we wanted to round out the top 3 best practices for a caregiver in this case?
Make sure that you're asking for help. That is so important. Like I said, 68% of the time, those caregivers self-sacrifice, thinking they can do this on their own. But what I'm asking them to do as they become more and more dementia aware is to think for that person 24 hours a day, and they lose the ability to take care of themselves, because you have to be 10 steps ahead of that person in your thinking for them, that you have no time. And often they're not getting enough sleep. They're not really taking care of themselves, because the demands of dementia care are so extreme that it's so easy for them to slip off. And it's so emotionally painful, they can fall into depression and get isolated. So always, 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 you have to ask for help. Now, there's a little caveat to that, because they can go out and find help, professional help, but it also can happen that professional help is not dementia aware trained either. And so they stumble. They send a caregiver, but you don't say that you're getting a caregiver for you because you have dementia symptoms, because what is that person going to tell you?
I don't need them.
I don't need them. So you have to do creative interventions. And so you have to have professionals that understand that. What's worked really good for me is to say, well, one of our neighbors wants to come over and have tea, but that neighbor happens to be a professional caregiver that's being paid for their time, but they come over as a neighbor down the street, want to have tea with you, want to go for a walk, wants to take you to the grocery store. They're going anyway, but they're trained to come in and have this positive, these positive statements and talk to that person's feeling, and they're in like Flynn. So there has to be that interaction as well. So I hit the ground running every day. I've got to train this professional caregiver, and I have to train this family caregiver. I have to train this first responder, because we all have to be on the same page here.
Yeah. The not only affecting the family and the roles within the family, but this also has a significant financial impact. Can you talk about that?
Absolutely. I often am. It just breaks my heart when I'm working with caregivers who start to realize they need help, or maybe they're at a point where they need out of home help. They need to look for a dementia care community because that person needs that level of care, and they're thinking that their health insurance is going to pay for this. Health insurance does not pay for dementia care. And dementia care can be extremely expensive. I recently heard average, and I see this because I travel all over the United States, average for a good dementia care in a community can be upwards of $10,000 a month. who has that in their wallet if they don't have any kind of long-term care. And often long-term care has this initial time that you have to pay out of pocket before it even kicks in. In most states, there are states that have some Medicaid support, but not in every state, and it's not a lot of support. There's very little support if you're bringing in-home care into the home. And the only thing that you would that your health insurance would kick in is if it's some kind of physical challenge that they would need to go to skilled nursing and have 24-hour medical care. That can be paid for by Medicare or health insurance. But other than that, this is all private pay, and it can be extremely, extremely expensive.
When you're looking at the caregiver and the struggles that they're going through to help maintain a quality of life for their loved one, what type of support is there for them?
Well, often it warms my heart when I see family members who are willing to really help with this. There are many nonprofits that are out there that you can that get grants that can help with some of this care. What is really helpful, I believe, is to become as educated about dementia as you possibly can, to give you the tools to guide others to build your village. And it is so necessary to build your village. And accept help. If your neighbor comes over and says, I see you're really struggling. How can I help? I can't provide the hands-on care, but I can run to the grocery store for you every week. You give me the list and I'll do that. If there's a family member that's long distance, if they can arrange to come, once a month and give that family caregiver, that primary caregiver respite. If you can find, like I said, organizations that maybe will pay for 4 or 8 hours a week for in-home care, you want to access absolutely everyone you can to help. And keep in mind, and this is really challenging emotionally, but most of these causes of loss of brain function and dementia symptoms, such as Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, these are progressive diseases that often are terminal. It could be many years, but if you are down the road and needing care and your loved one's really has extreme dementia symptoms, always reach out for hospice and palliative care, because that is paid for by health insurance and Medicare and Medicaid, often hospice and palliative care. And with dementia symptoms, you can have it for a longer amount of time because it's more difficult for the medical community to put their finger on when you're going to pass away. It's not like you can only get hospice if it's 6 months down the road, like it might be with other terminal illnesses, because there's no way to figure that out. It could go on for 2 years, 3 years, 7 years, 20 years. But often there are enough symptoms that need help that a dementia-aware hospice organization can come in and provide help with bathing, help with bedside care, help with durable medical equipment, all of those kinds of things. So, always reach out for whoever you can on this journey. Don't be afraid to ask for help, and always accept it when you get it.
I'm very grateful to palliative care and hospice. My mother had dementia from Parkinson's, and it as she got to the end of her life, they actually brought in a much higher quality care and provided her a significantly better quality of life into the end of her life. And I will always be grateful for them.
I was just at a conference in Indiana that was sponsored by a hospice organization. And we talked at length about how important it is to not be afraid to ask for hospice. Now, you might ask for hospice and they might say, oh, not quite ready yet, but don't be afraid to keep asking, because as soon as you can get it, it's so valuable.
Yeah. One of the problems that I had is my mother was getting to the point of not remembering anything, is didn't have a password to her phone and didn't have a password to her bank account. And I struggled even with the power of attorney to get the bank to work with me. I mean, we a real battle there. What is it that we can do to mitigate that issue?
We need to be really proactive in making sure we have any kind of legal paperwork, such as power of attorney for healthcare, power of attorney for finances. And it needs to be clear in that if this person becomes cognitively incapacitated, that would give you this power, legal power, to take over any of that. And often banks have their own power of finance. So it's really good early to get with that, whether it's your elderly spouse or your parents or whoever you're taking care of, to get that paperwork in place early so that you can be a partner with them. Once again, the earliest you do that, I say to families, if you're not on your mom and dad's bank account as that, have that ability to look at their bank account and help them with that, you need to do that early, because when they get that anosognosia, they're going to resist your help. It's going to make them paranoid. So, the earlier you get all of that paperwork in place, the easier it's going to be for you to slide in there and be able to take care of that.
Laura, we've also had it where clients or friends or family members have talked about doing more of a family story as well, so that the legacy persists, because that's one of the worst pieces to this, is when you see that family member slip away and you lose that family heritage. Do you have anything, a recommendation there as well, or has that come across in any of the research you've done?
Absolutely. And part of that journaling can help, but I've had families that do these beautiful videos where they're just having a conversation like this with their loved one, talking about, tell me the story. Don't ask. Don't say, can you tell me the story? But I love it, Mom, when you tell me the story when we went to Yellowstone and there was that big black bear in the women's bathroom and we were so scared. And they tell that story and they share that, and you have that as a video file. I've seen beautiful, they're like a memoir. And then you can start to have these videos and say, Mom, I laughed so hard when you tried to put your shirt on as your pants and you came stumbling down the hall. We laughed so hard, and have those lighter moments as the dementia begins to shut the doors on that person. Share this with them so that you can. I wish that I would have done that with my mom. She died suddenly of a heart attack trying to care for my dad, who had severe dementia symptoms, and she covered for him. We had no idea that it was going to affect her like this. And she became one of those statistics, 68% of the caregivers go first. But I so wish I could still hear her voice and hear the interaction with my mom and dad, and had videos of them. I have pictures, but not enough. And so that memoir, start early and build that video file. I'm so pleased to see that happening with families now.
Thank you, Laura. One of the questions that we like to ask our guests when they come on the show is, what financial advice have you received that's had an impact in your life?
Well, because I've watched so many struggle, my husband and I both decided that we would make sure that in our retirement plan, we would have a health a serious health account that is separate from anything else. So if we ever needed to pull for either one of us in-home care, dementia care, that we have that set aside, this pot of money that's for our health care in the future. Now, would it be enough? If I needed dementia care for 20 years, no, it wouldn't be enough. But it would be enough to help my husband survive. Now, and it's separate from our taking care of ourselves just day to day, so that even if that got ate up, he still would be able to care for himself after I was gone. Because, I see this with families too. They use up all of their retirement to care for that person, and then the surviving spouse has nothing left to live on. And so it's huge. It's so dynamic. And the earlier you start, when you don't even know you need it, of course, I'm sure we give this all to the advice to our kids, but the earlier we start planning for this, it's so, so important. So I feel, and you, both of you probably know much more about these kinds of plans that you can even teach me about. But that has been what my husband and I have done. And I don't know if you have better advice. You very well may have, but yeah.
We work with our clients a lot on that. We believe that early planning is very important, even before a diagnosis or symptoms start to show up, because proper preparation prevents poor performance. And we know that 42% of the people out there, almost 1 in 2 is going to have some type of dementia symptoms. And so starting early and putting things in place, thinking about your team when you see the first symptoms showing up, and preparing everyone going through that training is so important.
That's actually one of the biggest pieces that we see, is take that shroud of embarrassment away. So that way we're not engaging with clients at the most emotional time. I mean, that when that diagnosis first comes down and you have that emotion tied in, plus the what do I do now with my financial life, to have a plan in place well beforehand just adds confidence for not only the person receiving the diagnosis, but their entire group of loved ones.
Yes. And to know, have some kind of idea of what we're dealing with, get with a good neurologist and explain the symptoms. And although there's not a cure or prevention or treatment, the best thing to do is to have partners in the medical community that can be that medical support, but you still have to have that emotional knowledge, that emotional IQ when it comes to dementia awareness, so that you can help sync all of that information together. And when we're younger, we need to really understand that taking care of our heart, exercising, eating right has everything to do with our brain aging healthy as well. And so early prevention, early taking care of our body, early honoring that precious brain that we have, so that we can hold that off as long as we possibly can. So all of that information is so necessary. And so teaching the world dementia awareness and getting to those, I wish that dementia awareness was a high school class, mandatory, so that people would understand all of the fingers when it comes to dementia awareness, the financial, the emotional, the just life-changing event that this can be. And I know that high school students will be going, whatever, but if, at least plant the seed, right?
Right. Thank you for being the Dementia Whisperer and being on our show.
Thank you for allowing me to share. Thank you so much for everything you do for everyone.
If there's one message to take away from today's conversation, it's this. Planning is not just a financial exercise. It's an act of love. By securing your documents, centralizing your passwords, and making sure your spouse and family are aware of those, you're giving a gift of clarity in a time when clarity matters most. Laura's message reminds us that changes are happening in our lives, but it doesn't have to take away our dignity, our connection, or our stability. If you'd like to start your own readiness plan, contact Potentia Wealth, and we can assist you with that. On behalf of Todd, myself, and the entire Potentia Wealth team, thank you for joining us. Until next time, remember the power of wellness. Be proactive, be prepared, and take care of each other. Also, remember to like and subscribe. That way, you'll never miss an episode.
Thank you for listening to the Power of Wellness podcast. Click the follow button to be notified when new episodes become available. Visit our website at potentiawealth.com or give us a call at 408-288-7886. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Potentia Wealth or Potentia RIA. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider with any questions you may have regarding your investment planning. Investment advice offered through Potentia RIA LLC, a registered investment advisor.